Lagos State University, often referred to simply as LASU, has long carried a reputation that stretches far beyond academics. Over the years, it has become infamous for being one of the most volatile campuses in Lagos when it comes to confraternity clashes. Among all the groups that operated within its walls, two stood out the most: the Supreme Airlord Confraternity and the Black Axe Confraternity. These two rival groups were not just popular, they were considered the most dominant and feared across the campus grounds. Their presence was strong, their numbers were intimidating, and their history of confrontation ran deep. Since the early 2000s, LASU had been the stage for a long-running power struggle between these two groups. Rumors and stories passed down by both students and residents around the university speak of frequent tensions and shocking events that turned peaceful days into scenes of panic. Whispers of midnight meetings, mysterious disappearances, coded hand signs, and sudden bursts of conflict filled the air. For many students, especially those who simply wanted to study and go home, these stories became a silent reality they had to live with every day. What made LASU even more talked about was the sheer number of incidents that had reportedly occurred there compared to other universities in Lagos State. While other campuses experienced occasional confraternity activity, LASU was said to have gone through periods of intense and repeated clashes, making it one of the most watched and feared institutions in terms of internal group conflicts. Some individuals rose to legendary status during this era, not for academic excellence, but for how deeply involved they became in the underworld scene on campus. One such name that echoed through LASU's halls was Dewami the World Ostrich, a known figure in the Supreme Airlord Confraternity. As a student, he reportedly commanded attention and respect, building a reputation that would later earn him a place in the historical records of the group. Tales of his daring presence and calculated moves spread across not just LASU, but other institutions as well. From the other side came Level, a powerful and widely respected figure from the Black Axe Confraternity. His influence was said to be unmatched during his time on campus. Alongside him were other names that students wouldn't easily forget: Stone, OC, and EIYE, individuals whose presence seemed to shape the very atmosphere of LASU during their era. Among all the confrontations that had taken place within the university, one particular clash between the Supreme Airlords and the Black Axe would go down as the most intense and unforgettable. It wasn't just another scuffle between rival groups, this one shook the entire institution to its core. The tension had been building for weeks, and when it finally erupted, it led to the tragic loss of a key figure believed to be a leader from one of the confraternities. His passing sent shockwaves through the student body and triggered a chain reaction of emotions across the entire university. In the days that followed, fear gripped the campus like never before. Students who had nothing to do with any of the groups became nervous to even walk alone. Posters began to appear on walls, hostels, and gates, boldly carrying a haunting message: Lagos State University is not an abattoir. That statement alone captured the pain, confusion, and desperation felt by many. The campus was no longer just a place for learning, it had turned into something far more dangerous and unpredictable. Protests erupted. Students, both scared and angry, gathered to demand answers. Some called for stronger security. Others demanded investigations and justice. Parents and guardians, hearing the news, started withdrawing their children or pressuring them to transfer. The school authorities struggled to maintain control as the atmosphere grew more charged by the day. Though the full details of what truly happened during that clash remain hidden in the whispers of former students and the cautious words of insiders, one thing was clear: that moment in time marked a dark chapter in the university's history. And to this day, those who lived through it still carry the memories of a campus once caught in a storm of secret wars, lost dreams, and silent fears. The roots of the infamous conflict between the Supreme Airlord Confraternity and the Black Axe Confraternity at Lagos State University were clouded in mystery and rumor. No one could point to a single, confirmed cause. Instead, the campus buzzed with whispers, conflicting accounts, and a growing sense of unease. Some believe the tension began with something as personal and emotional as a romantic entanglement. According to this version, a member of one of the confraternities had a girlfriend who allegedly began seeing someone from the opposing group. This alone, it was said, created a ripple effect of anger and resentment. In the world of confraternity loyalty, personal matters could quickly become public battles. The idea that a member of a rival group could form a relationship, even just rumored, with someone tied to an opponent was enough to spark outrage, especially when egos and reputations were at stake. But that wasn't the only theory. Other sources, including former students and those familiar with the inner workings of campus life, told a different story. They argued that the tension didn't start with a romantic dispute at all. Rather, it was connected to long-standing issues, unresolved arguments, betrayals, and past incidents that had never truly been settled. According to this account, the peace that existed before the conflict was fragile, more like a silent agreement to ignore past wrongs than a real reconciliation. Underneath the surface, anger still simmered. Some grudges had simply gone quiet, not disappeared. Regardless of which version held the most truth, what mattered was that something serious was brewing beneath the surface. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore, it was becoming something bigger, something heavier. The air on campus began to change. People noticed the looks exchanged across faculty paths, the silent gatherings in dark corners, the increased presence of certain faces around strategic spots on campus. It became clear to those paying attention that a major confrontation might be coming. Sensing the rising tension, both the school authorities and the student union government quickly stepped in. They knew too well how fast things could escalate if not addressed early. Meetings were arranged. Representatives from both groups were invited to sit down and talk. There was pressure on all sides, from faculty, from parents, from fellow students, to restore calm before things spiraled out of control. In those closed-door meetings, both confraternities were urged to consider the bigger picture. The school emphasized the importance of peace and the dangers of allowing emotions and past issues to destroy the academic future of everyone involved. The student leaders played their part too, reminding everyone that violence would only bring more attention, more pressure, and more consequences. In what appeared to be a major breakthrough, both groups agreed to a peace deal. There was an understanding, at least publicly, that whatever offenses had occurred in the past, they would be put behind them. For a few weeks, things actually seemed to calm down. The tension on campus eased slightly. Students began to relax again. The rumors died down. It looked like the peace effort had worked. But underneath the calm, something dangerous was taking shape. Despite the handshake agreement and notes exchanged during the peace talks, some members weren't ready to let go of the past. And then, without warning, the fragile truce was shattered. The Black Axe Confraternity made a bold move that shocked the campus. In what was clearly a planned act, they targeted a known member of the Supreme Air Lords. The individual was reportedly ambushed in a quiet area, away from crowds. It was said to be a direct response to what they called unsettled issues, a form of retaliation for previous offenses they believed had never been properly addressed. This act shook the entire university. The campus, once again, found itself plunged into fear. The peace treaty, which had offered a short-lived sense of stability, was now meaningless. The attack didn't just mark the return of tension, it marked the start of something far more serious. A storm was brewing, and the university community was about to witness one of the most intense confrontations in its history. The leadership of the school scrambled to contain the situation, but the damage was already done. The air was thick with the fear of what might come next. Students began working in groups. Many stayed away from classes. Some even left campus entirely, unwilling to wait and see how bad things would get. For the members of both confraternities, the conflict had officially reignited, and this time, it wouldn't be so easy to silence. Although both confraternities had initially agreed to a peace treaty after school authorities and student leaders intervened, it soon became clear that not everyone was satisfied with the outcome. Among members of the Black Axe Confraternity, there remained a strong sense of unresolved anger and bitterness. While the Supreme Air Lords were willing to let go of past grievances for the sake of calm on campus, some Black Axe members felt that the offenses committed against them were far too deep and personal to simply be forgiven. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Some believed that the Supreme Air Lords had crossed a line long ago, a line that no peace talk or handshake could erase. As far as these individuals were concerned, the so-called treaty was a one-sided attempt to silence them, while their pain and demands for justice were ignored. To them, agreeing to peace without any form of response was seen as weakness. And weakness was unacceptable. That was the mindset that led to the tragic event that shook the fragile calm. Despite the standing peace treaty, a member of the Supreme Air Lords was taken out by the Black Axe. It happened swiftly, and without public warning. The move was deliberate, a statement, a message. And it was loud and clear, the conflict was far from over. Surprisingly, the Supreme Air Lords didn't strike back immediately. They remained silent in the days that followed. To outsiders, it seemed like they were ignoring the attack, perhaps trying to avoid another cycle of chaos. But in truth, they were simply waiting. Watching. Gathering information. Preparing. Weeks passed. Then, on a quiet evening, members of the Supreme Air Lords gathered at Kuramo, a well-known spot in the city where they often held private meetings. The gathering was intended to be discreet, away from the prying eyes of the campus. Only trusted members were informed of the meeting's time and location. Security was tight. Everyone present was either a long-standing member or vouched for by someone within the inner circle. But even in secrecy, danger can find a way in. Unbeknownst to the Air Lords, the Black Axe had grown suspicious. They believed the Air Lords were planning a retaliation for the attack on their member, and they wanted to know how far things had gone. So they made a bold move. They sent a spy. The individual chosen was not a regular face around LASU. He wasn't a student of the university and didn't operate there. Instead, he was a known figure within the Black Axe structure in another institution outside Lagos State University. His unfamiliarity with LASU was exactly why he was picked. The assumption was that the Air Lords wouldn't recognize him. He would blend in easily, observe quietly, and report back. But things didn't go as planned. As the Air Lords meeting at Kuramo progressed, members began to notice something was off. One individual among them didn't seem to fit. He wasn't mingling naturally. He avoided eye contact with some of the more senior members and seemed unsure of the coded phrases exchanged during discussions. For a group built on loyalty, secrecy, and structure, even the slightest inconsistency was enough to raise alarm. Two sharp-eyed members quietly signaled their suspicion to the leadership. The meeting was paused, and the unfamiliar face was called out. At first, he tried to maintain his cover, claiming he had been invited by someone else. But when pressed harder, when the tone in the room shifted from friendly to cold and questioning, cracks began to show. His story didn't hold up. Surrounded and with no clear way out, he eventually confessed under intense scrutiny. He admitted he was not from LASU and that he had been sent by the Black Axe to watch and gather information on the Air Lords' plans. The room fell silent. What followed was a moment of quiet anger, the kind that speaks louder than shouting ever could. For the Supreme Air Lords, this admission was a final insult. Not only had one of their members been eliminated despite a peace agreement, but now their rivals had the audacity to send someone to spy on them in their own city, during a private meeting meant to bring clarity and direction. The decision was swift. Right there at Kuramo, the Air Lords acted. By the time news began to circulate around campus about what had happened at that meeting, the spy was already gone. And with that act, the fragile balance between both confraternities collapsed completely. No one could pretend peace existed anymore. The quiet before the storm was over. A new chapter in the conflict was about to begin, one even more intense, more personal, and more dangerous than what had come before. Weeks had passed since the Supreme Air Lords took the life of the external observer who had been sent by the Black Axe to secretly monitor their activities during a private meeting at Kuramo. Though the act had been decisive and sent a strong message, it did little to satisfy the deeper thirst for revenge among the Air Lord ranks. Within the inner circle of the Air Lords, there was quiet frustration. Many of them felt the operation, while bold, did not go far enough. To them, the external figure was just a pawn, someone who wasn't even officially part of the Lagos State University environment. He hadn't grown within the campus system. He didn't carry the same weight or presence as those who were actively involved in the on-campus struggle. Taking him out was seen by some as a missed opportunity. It didn't fully balance the scales, not after one of their own had been targeted while a peace agreement was still in place. The hunger for direct retaliation, one that would send a message not just to the Black Axe, but to the entire university community, began to grow. Quiet meetings were held, plans whispered in coded language. This time, the Air Lords wanted to make a bold move that would leave no doubt about their strength, their anger, and their refusal to be seen as weak. The target was clear, the Black Axe leader on campus. This individual wasn't just a member, he was the most respected figure within the Black Axe structure at LASU. He was believed to have played a key role in the decision that led to the breaking of the peace treaty and the attack on the Airlord member that had triggered the spiral. Removing him, the Airlords believed, would be more than revenge, it would be a public warning. A statement that would echo far beyond the campus. After weeks of tracking and quiet surveillance, the opportunity came. The Black Axe leader had reportedly booked a room at a small, low-key hotel in Anamoji, a place known by locals as Happy Days Hotel. It wasn't the kind of place anyone would expect such a high-profile individual to stay. But perhaps that was the point: secrecy, silence, and avoidance. But he had been found. On the night of the operation, the Airlord squad moved with precision. Every step had been planned carefully. They arrived without drawing attention, and by the time they left, the Black Axe leader had been taken out. News of the incident spread like wildfire. From the streets of Anamoji to the gates of LASU, the whispers turned into shockwaves. Students, lecturers, non-academic staff, everyone knew that a major turning point had just occurred. If there had ever been a thin thread holding back a full-blown conflict, it had now been cut. What followed was complete chaos. The Black Axe Confraternity, now mourning the loss of their leader, erupted in anger. They moved swiftly and fiercely, determined to strike back at anyone they believed was connected to the Airlords. The streets near campus, once bustling with normal student life, became tense with fear. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore, it was a full-scale internal war. The Supreme Airlords, knowing retaliation was coming, didn't wait to be ambushed. They launched their own counter-response. In a matter of days, the campus and surrounding neighborhoods became flashpoints for a string of back-and-forth attacks. It was no longer about settling one score, now it was about survival, dominance, and vengeance. And tragically, in the middle of it all were innocent bystanders, students who had no ties to any group, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. There were reports of mistaken identities, random attacks, and fear so intense that students started refusing to attend classes. Some parents rushed to pull their children out of school entirely. Others sent messages begging their children to stay indoors or relocate. As the conflict grew worse, student activists began organizing peaceful protests. They held placards, walked in silence through the campus, and posted strong messages on walls and gates. One message stood out more than any other. Printed in bold red letters and taped across the university's main gate were words that pierced the heart of every observer. Lagos State University is not an abattoir. That message reflected the pain and trauma that had settled over the school. A place meant for learning, friendship, and personal growth had turned into something else entirely, a space where fear had replaced freedom, and danger seemed to lurk around every corner. It became a defining moment. Even long after the dust settled and calm slowly returned to the school, students and alumni still remembered those dark weeks. They remembered the silence in the halls, the hurried footsteps at night, the uncertainty that clouded each day. Most importantly, they remembered how quickly everything could fall apart when pride, anger, and revenge were allowed to lead. Let this story serve as a reminder to us all. Cultism and violence never bring true power. They only bring pain, loss, and regret. Let us say no to confraternity activities. Let us say no to bloodshed and bitterness. Let us embrace peace, dialogue, and unity, for the sake of our future, our families, and our communities.